Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're up to Discourse 21, page 150, chapter 80. So now, after around 20 chapters of discussing the impact of transcendence, makif, on pnimi, on immanence, which means that they have a relationship. So in the last chapter, the Rabbi Rashab summed up, and nevertheless, b'chol zeh, keser, and ratzon, desire, and makif still retains a certain detached element. And in that context, all makifim, all ksarim, evolve from one another and have their own particular track and relationship. That relationship is one of transcendence, meaning it's not defined by the structure. So it affects the structure, it's within the structure, but like ratzon, it still remains and retains its detached side to it. And in some ways, ratzon, all the retzainus are really part of one essence. Even though there's a ratzon of keser of atzilus, a keser of bria, a keser of yitzira, so on, but they all are ksarim, they all remain keser, and as such they remain separate and apart. And in some ways, as I said, they are even one. And he explained that when it comes to the keiches pnimim, immanent energy, immanent faculties, through the growth of one, let's say chochma v'asiyah, wisdom connected to a craft, take embroidery or an artist, drawing, it can never become chochma v'atzilus. It's just it's made up of different ingredients. Whereas keser, being that it's a desire, and a desire doesn't take on shape and form, so a desire, through growth, one can become keser of asiyah, can become elevated to keser of atzilus and beyond, as he explained. It can even go higher due to the fact of the tmimus and so on. So we see from this, bottom line is, that the etzem uchus is actually, one ratzon is fundamentally the same qualities. They're made up of the same ingredients. I think that's a good way to put it. Chochma and binah are not the same ingredients. Chochma v'asiyah and chochma v'atzilus are not. But the ratzon of one world or ratzon of another, it's a ratzon. At the end of the day, it's a desire. The only thing is the desire is different. The desire to, let's say, write, or desire to walk, or the desire to study are different manifestations. But they're all desire of the nefesh. They're still all hatiyas ha-nefesh. In context of the divine, they're all divine expression. We discussed the different examples for department heads, the main head, but the bottom line is it's desire. And that's why it's blikvul. It doesn't have ischalkus, nimshel b'chol mokim. Wherever it is, it retains its ein safe element. So this is the other side of the coin of transcendence. And then he finalized with the pasuk Tshuva Yisrael, and he said there's three types of tshuva that are all alluded to in the pasuk. The Tshuva Yisrael is the tshuva of nefesh. Then there's kachum cham dvarim dibur is the tshuva of ruach. And then there's the final expression, which is even a love kol sisav, and that's the tshuva of neshama. And the kol refers to the makifim that they're all encompassed together. So now we continue. 21st Maimer, Basukas Teishvu, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, the teichen of the haschal of this Maimer is ribu yemiyad be'er pnimi v'kol shkem be'er makif. Well, we'll see what that means. Ribu yemiyad means more and less. Okay, so Basukas Teishvu Chulu. This is said, Leil, the second night of Sukkot, Tafresh Ayin Gimel. Basukas Teishvu, in Sukkot you shall sit, in Hutz you shall sit, Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael, Yeshvu Basukas. Now the word Ezrach, of course, has many meanings, but the literal meaning is Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael, everyone who is I think how they define it literally, every citizen. Every Israeli citizen, every citizen of Israel shall sit in Sukkot. V'tzarech lahavin, and we have to understand Ma'o Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael Yeshvu. What is this meaning of Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael Yeshvu? He just said Halei Kfar Nemar. Didn't he just say B'Sukkos Teishvu? What does this add? He just said, "B'tzukas teishvu shivasem." You shall sit in sukkahs. Then he says, "The kol ezra b'Yisrael should sit in a sukkah." Over Medrash Rabbi Isa and Medrash Rabbi it says, "Amalei Hakadosh Baruch Hu Avram." Hashem, God said to Avram, "Ata marta v'tishanu tachas ha'etz." You said, "Vishanu, we shall rest, we shall luxuriate." Recline. I don't know if a shait is a shait, maybe. We shall let's say, recline under the tree. Chayecha, which means by your life, which means like saying I promise you today, like you shall know. Chayecha shani pereya levanecha, I will repay your children, b'midbar, b'yishuv, ulasid. So just like you rested and sat under the tree, I'll repay your children in the wilderness, b'yishuv. B'midbar, b'yishuv, ulasid. Not three times. In the wilderness, I will repay them, b'yishuv, when they will settle in a land. In other words, in a civilized land, yishuv, ulasid, in the future. B'midbar. When he gave them the food, right there it says there. That's where there is about the Chnos. He gave them shade from the heat. Yeah. So he says, I will pay like this. So what is the payment? Bamidbar. Here are the three things. Paras onan lamosach. He spread out a cloud like a mosach, like a curtain. Meaning that it was the clouds that protected the Jews in the wilderness. B'yishuv b'sukas teishvu. B'yishuv means b'sukas teishvu. You'll sit in sukkahs when you are on land, when you come to civilized land, in the cities. Well, also love v'sukkah til etzel yemel. And love, it says that the sukkah will be a shade of the day. May a day shade. In other words, when the sun is beating, it will be a shade to you. So that's the medrash. What is this thing? V'yishanu tachas ha'etz will rest under the tree.
That is a direct connection.
Yeah. Umau b'sukas teishvu shetzorach liyas shetzorach lemer shezeu l'mayla me'in v'yishanu. So first of all, what's the inyan of v'yishanu tachas ha'etz? What exactly is the significance of that? That it caused such rewards. And what is the second reward? The one in Teishvu it says, "Basukas Teishvu tzarich liyashem shel l'mayla minyan v'yishanu." You have to say it's higher. Shariach schar v'adei gavoyim ap'ula. Reward is always higher, is greater than the action. So what exactly is this achievement of sitting in the so-called in the shade or sitting in the sukkah? V'gam haloi ha'isa sukkah setachas ha'ilam psula. Here he says resting under a tree. Isn't it fact the halacha is that building a sukkah under a tree, psula, it's not kosher. It's not a kosher sukkah. And we learn it actually from this pasuk. Basukas teishvu. You shall sit in sukkahs not under a tree. In other words, you shall sit not under a tree. So we see from this sukkahs teishvu is actually a completely different thing. It's actually antithetical. It's opposite of resting under a tree. So we have to understand what is this inyan of sitting in sukkahs. And to understand all this, we shall preface what we discussed earlier. The difference between the transcendent energy and the immanent energy. Immanent energy comes in a distinction, in a division, in a diversity, the elements in worlds. That's what it comes. It's all about structure. Both in the worlds that are higher than Atzilus, and also in the worlds of Atzilus Bri Yitzirasi. In other words, it's defined by chalkus, by structure, by distinction of one level and the next. Makif and the transcendent energy of B'chinas Ein Sof. Ubligvul. Transcendent energy is Ein Sof, no end, Ubligvul, and without limits. Ayin Beis Chalkus Klal has no distinctions at all. Dagam sheyesh makifim klolim umakifim pratim, even though there are general macrocosmic makifim, makifim like Tehiri Allah, Tehiri Tata, Malchus of Atzilus, the Klolos before the Tzimtzum, and Ak, and makifim pratim of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. Mekol mokim hakol b'chinas Ein Sof b'lis Chalkus Klal. Nevertheless, they're all in a state of Ein Sof without any distinction. That's what we've learned till now.
But before, didn't we learn the concept that the makif is somehow weaker in the lower level in some way?
We addressed it at length in the last chapter. It's exactly what he discussed. Right at the bottom of page 148. He asked that question specifically. 3 lines from the bottom, he asked that question. 4 lines. I explained it with maybe, I don't know how many examples, but the many, many examples. I've discussed it at length. I mean, I could say it again if everybody is unclear about this. You're unclear? Can you explain it to somebody else? Do you understand the difference between the desire for levels and the difference between the levels themselves? Let's start with that. Or it's the same thing by you? Do you understand the difference between the desire for levels and the levels themselves? You have a general desire for a home. That desire then breaks down to the home's sections. Do you understand the desire for each section different than the sections themselves or not? That's the first question. Do you understand that it's a qualitative difference? It's not a quantitative difference. That's the key. So of course there's a desire for each level, because that's what the whole point of Ratzon is. Just like there's a desire for existence. Remember, I explained all the way from the top. Only Atzmus is completely detached of everything, because it doesn't have attachments and relationships. But as soon as Eirei and Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, even before the desire, even that doesn't have a relationship, but it's already existential. It's Metzias Nimtza. Then the Ratzon, even the Ratzon before Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, we're not even talking specific Ratzon, it's all about relationship. How much do you reckon with, and how much do you care about the product? Or more importantly, not how much you care, how close are you to it? So Etzem HaNefesh is very distant from when you sit down and eat a meal, even though it's the one that's sending directions through the Ratzon, through everything for you to go eat. But the Etzem HaNefesh wants to have the kavanah fulfilled. And part of the kavanah is you have to eat, and you eat with a bracha and a kavanah, it goes back. So it all comes down to that immersion. That last shliach that goes and digs the well is the one that is carrying the Ratzon to digging the well. But its relationship with the well is not like the actual digging itself. It's more the instruction for it. So in that sense, all the Ratzonos are really part of one thing. It's fine. This needs explanation all the time, because we don't live in a world. See, all this is about elevating our minds and our hearts to a different type of understanding existence. This is existence on the desire level, not existence on the functional level. We are trapped. We're addicts of functionality. We function all the time. Everything is functioned by us. We don't understand the roots of functions. We have to extrapolate and say, wow, it's like, there's a paradox, it's amorphous, it's invisible. So that's why it's a constant struggle. In other words, even though I've explained it many times, that's why I'm saying it is aveda to understand the level of Ratzon. Because what you're doing is, as I said many times, we're not doing an academic exercise in quantum mechanics. We're trying to understand, be more refined in understanding the forces that shape existence. So just like there's a force of the instruments of chochma, binah, das, which are very much part of the structure, there's a force that is beyond chochma, binah, das. That's why when we do a mitzvah, we have to always know 2 things. God wants the detail, but above all, remember, there's a Ratzon. You're fulfilling His desire. It doesn't matter the detail right now.
No mitzvah's college, no mitzvah's like...
There is, but you can't. That's not your business to distinguish between the 2. There's 2 things at once, because at the same time, yes, when you eat matzah, you're not putting on film. You're not doing the same thing. You can't just say who really cares what shape it takes. It does matter. On Shabbos, you do Shabbos. You can't do certain mitzvahs on certain other days. They're not allowed to act, as a matter of fact. So mitzvahs are definitely defined by structure. Look, it's ultimately the interface between structure and beyond structure. So at this practical point where we are, we're just trying to understand, here's the structure, here's the desire for the structure. Now desire is a whole entity, it's a force. It's a force. Just like electricity is a force of electricity before the electricity fits into particular appliances, Ratzon is a force of divine force before it applies itself to Atzilus and so on. As I mentioned the other day, think of it, if you want an imagery, think of it like this. Ein Sof is basically dispatching a Ratzon Klali, which in turn dispatches a whole bunch of agents that are all carriers of the program from the source. Now they each go to their particular world. But they understand each other because they all were in that same room when the dispatch took place. You do Atzilus, you do Bria, you do Atzira. And they have to all commensurate. It's like a teacher has to fit to its particular students. Here it's not a teacher, here it's a makif. So it's a makif prati. It's Keser of Asiya, not Keser of Abriya or Atzilus. But they're all carrying that source code. Let's put it this way. Ratzon carries the source code.
It's better than electricity. Electricity, because you get to a small place, it's not going to have
All examples are inadequate. Just for the record, all examples are inadequate. The examples is trying to help us get to that point. So the bottom line, no, I think in some ways, I like the example because it's very good. It's amorphous.
Huh? Saying it's more diminished than a smaller appliance. The electricity.
So that's a bad example.
It's exactly the same thing. The Ratzon of Asiya is also diminished. The questions.
It's not a good example. It
is diminished to some extent. It's not diminished, but its personality is not diminished.
No, the makif is diminished.
No, the makif is not diminished. Qualitatively, it's
quantitative, it is diminished. Qualitative, it's not.
Qualitative.
Right.
What does this last statement mean then? It's still from the Ayin itself.
Because that's what it is. It's carrying the code. I keep asking, do you understand the difference between the desire and the levels? There is a distinction. It is a desire for Asiya. It's not a desire for Bria. There is a distinction between one and the next, but they all carry when you can. Look, the problem is you can't figure out something that can be two different things at the same time. Is that the problem? It has to be either a table or a chair. It's not a table or a chair. It's a Ratzon for Asiya and it's still a Ratzon. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so qualitative is the same.
I don't know about the words. Why don't you understand it as being a more subtle dimension? Okay, it's anyway the carrier of the code. It's the carrier of the source code. Take that away, and all the spheres may lose direction. It's like take away the department head who's supposed to be heading that particular world, and the spheres are all aligned, but they don't have that so-called the source code as it is from the source, from the architect completely.
Is that where we are now?
We're far worse than that. We don't even have the immanent energy. I mean, we're in Golus. Golus is a whole other story. Golus is a helm of it all. I told you, for us to figure out air pnimi would be nice, or air makif. Anyway, the sphere. That's anosically talking about neshama. I don't know. By me, there's no shinui before and after gimel tammuz. You have to remember when you're talking atzmizdika levels. You're talking about shinui and giluyim. You know. Look, if atzmus is everywhere, I have no problem with the Rebbe being everywhere. But you can't be megashim it. It's because it's higher than the mokim and zman. You know, you don't need anything here. Just read the Tanya, get it Sakej, Simachov Zion, it's very clear. Where a tzaddik is after the guf is not there. You have to remember, if a tzaddik's tzaddik is chayim ruchnim, even when he saw him, it wasn't him.
Why did Ebba and why did we go to the oil?
So that's what you're going to have to learn chassidus to figure that out. It's just like Ratzon. Because it takes on the shape for that. We should be able to relate to it. That's why. The problem is, the point is not to be megashim on our level. The point is for us to be ruchnizik enough to understand it on that level. That's the key. Whatever, there's a Torah that tells us certain things. Do you think there's logic for the oil? I mean, if the neshama is everywhere, for some reason there's something there. I don't know. You know, if you can connect the souls, trust me, you can connect wherever you go. But clearly, tzaddikim went to shtadchus akivit tzaddikim. Most people today they do it. It's more token. It's not like they're. It's whatever. It's symbolic. Why? Because I don't know. I never saw that shot. That's why. What I just said. No, I'm talking about why. It doesn't say the reason. That doesn't. You're connecting it to the reason, but that doesn't say anywhere. I never heard that reason before. Is this your theory or you saw it in the Sfarim? There's entire Maimorim on Shtadchus Akivit Tzaddikim. I never saw that. That I never saw.
I was told that in Shara Ruchel Kodesh that when a person goes to Kever Tzadikim that the nefesh enters the group and it's a live mamish, not ki'ivur, it's a live mamish.
I don't know, you have to see these languages. I'd have to.
I heard this in Label Grove three times at least. 2 times.
In general, things like this, I personally don't like to see things in sources. When you start talking about these type of things. No, but I mean not just that he. I'm sure he has a source. I personally would want to see it before I would comment on it. But I would want to see it before commenting because everything is in language. It's what it means exactly.
He also tells the Mitzvah Rebbe, in the name of Mitzvah Rebbe, that when you go to Kibbutz, he sees you as if you're alive, as if he's alive.
Okay, anyway. So now we continue chapter 80. Remember, the work is to continuously challenge yourself and your perception of reality. And Ratzon and Keser and the makifim force us to do that because it's forcing you to go to a place that we don't see. You're going into the engine room. We see the product. We don't see the desire that brought this product into being. And what he's showing us here is that there is a desire in each aspect of existence. And that desire remains a transcendent force and has impact on existence. That's the bottom line.
You see the front end, you don't see the back end.
Right? So the first 56 chapters of Ayin Beis was the back end of Pnimi. What defines the structure? Chochma, sefirot, the kav, all that. Eris, kalim, the long discussion. From 56 and on, primarily from 59 till where we are now, 79, the discussion of the makif, the forces behind the immanent. It begins that the makif, for the tzimtzum, in the makif arose the desire for the pnimi. That's the first words he used. That's where the ratzon ashir atzmei b'keach, that the heirachy envisioned and allocated and estimated what the structure will be like. And that in turn creates these two different paths. So ratzon remains a type of elusive and detached force, but it's within existence. There's chapters upon chapters. To be very honest, this would require going back again and learning it all again from Perek Memches and Tanya. The makif is everywhere except we don't feel it. So really, makif gives us an opportunity to understand the energy that is divine within existence, but not part of existence. That's really what it comes down to. Where pnimi is the divine energy within existence and part of existence. So now he's going to continue in this discussion back to makifim. Nevertheless, we still have to understand iggulim. Aren't there 10 sefirot of iggulim? So the last 20 chapters he explained what makifim pratim are. That each world has its desire, and they're still all really one ratzon, made up of the same personality. But now we have another thing. In Kabbalah it says there's 10 spheres of iggulim. Like it says in Eitz Chaim, B'tchilas in the beginning, just like there are 10 spheres of Yesher. Let's again, Yesher means straight. Yesher refers to the straight line of the kav of Pnimi. In Kabbalistic terminology, makif, Pnimi, or Sev of Mamala, in Chassidus, is iggulim and Yesher. So these are all, you could say, they're synonyms. Iggulim, makifim, Sev of Klam, and Keser. One family, Yesher, Kav, Pnimi, Mamala Klam is the second family. Immanence and transcendence in general terms. So he says in Eitz Chaim, just like there are 10 spheres of Yesher and Pnimi, there are 10 spheres of iggulim. So before we spoke about the Kav creates the igul of Ak, then it creates the igul of Atzilus, or Akudim, the igul of Bria, of Yitzir Asiyah. So what we have is, let's say, 5 iggulim. But now he's going further. In Eitz Chaim it says that the iggulim have actually esesphiris, not just general iggulim for each world. A keser of Atzilus, a keser of Bria. There's actually iggulim. There's chochma, the igul of chochma, the igul of binah, the igul of das. So what's happening now is he suddenly transcendence is getting much closer to spheres. So because spheres are there. Not just general desires for the rooms of the cosmic order of Shtalshlus, but he says there's spheres, the iggulim. Igul ha-kesed, igul ha-chochma, igul ha-malchus. So besides the general circle for each world, let's call the department head of Atzilus, there's now iggulim. Chochma has a pnimi, has an igul. There's an igul of chochma, there's an igul of binah, igul of das.
Within every world.
Right.
There's an eagle of Kesser, even though Kesser itself is an eagle.
Even in Biyah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's an eagle of Kesser.
The bottom line is everything has iggulim. There's everything, wherever you go, there's iggulim and yesher.
Eagle of an eagle? I mean, Kesser itself is
Fine, so there's eagle within eagle. That's how the whole point is. There's the eagle hagadol. That's why it's called eagle hagadol. It's the large sphere because it's the one that surrounds everything. I'm sorry. So we see from this that there's a schalkus, a distinction of 10 spheres, also in the world of iggulim. That means in the world of in the level of Ein Seif and Bligvul. So he said till now, yes, we understand the distinction because the desires apply to the worlds, but now we're actually saying there's sefirot. Before we continue, what do you want to say?
No, he started counting 10 spheres from Kesser. He said, S spheres the iggulim, igul like Kesser.
Ad igul malchus.
So he doesn't count malchus, but he counts Kesser instead. It's very interesting.
What are you saying? Igul HaKesser, Igul HaChochma, Ad Igul
Then
HaMalchus.
it'll be 11, it won't be 10.
It doesn't count Das. If you count Kesser, you don't count Das. That's why you never say Das. He always says Chochma Binah, and then he says Chesed and Gvura. It depends. When you count the external spheres, you don't count Das. When you count the inner spheres, you count Das. It's another discussion. It's not... And l'cheira you have to say that they're distinguished in their level because we're saying they're kesser of chochma, kesser of binah, because they're bechinas kesser, chochma, and binah.
Why don't we have 11? Don't we have 11?
Well, 11. We don't count das.
Right. But I mean, in Twitter there's 11 iggulim.
What does that have to do with discussion here?
Yeah, right. It's a different discussion, right? But when you make that statement,
How do you say chalkus madregas? So we see that there's distinction of levels. He's saying l'cheira because you could argue, you know what? Spheres of Yesher are actually 10 different spheres. In the makifim, it's a figurative. He's saying, but from the lashon spheres, the iggulim is mashma. There's actual spheres. But mele gamma makifim madregas mechulakis, mechulakim, mechulakis. So also the makifim are distinguished levels. Makif yesh be'es sefirot, being because every makif, every eagle has 10 spheres. Like the example, the makif kloli, the all-encompassing macrocosmic transcendence of ak. Yesh be'es sefirot has 10 spheres. Like it says in Eitz Chaim, the ba'ak yesh es spheres the yeshiv, es spheres the iggulim, specifically. In other words, it doesn't just say there's 10 spheres of pnimi of yeshiv. There's also 10 spheres of iggulim. V'chein b'kesed atzilus, and the same thing with kesed atzilus. Yesh es spheres has also 10 spheres. B'chinas kesed gufa. In the level of kesed itself.
You mentioned this before, that Ak has 10 spheres.
It doesn't mention, but it says it.
You never mentioned it before.
Maybe he alluded to it. I don't think so. So kesed gufa levad masha kesed kel has the spheres the yesher. Besides that, kesed encompasses the 10 spheres of pnimi of all the 10 spheres below it. It itself is made up of 10 spheres. That's why you have chochma of ak, of atik. You have binah of atik. You have gvura of atik. You have chesed of atik. So there's spheres in the iggulim now. Yeah, listen. This is a further development of the hemshech. The interface is slowly developing here. Yeah, you think you had it all figured out? V'chein b'kesed debriya, and the same thing kesed debriya has 10 spheres in it. And being that every makif has 10 spheres, which are l'cheira, seemingly they are separate levels. Memela gama makifim b'chinas ischalkus. So also makifim are in a state of ischalkus. How could you say the makifim don't have distinction? They have clearly 10 spheres within them. And this contradicts to what we discussed earlier. That Ayin makif has no distinctions, and it's literally ein seif, meaning seamless, meaning shapeless. Now, obviously, if you really think about it, you can come to many different answers based on what he said earlier, especially in chapter 59 that I keep referring to. If you remember where he said there, he asked the question there about Keser and Pnimi. So that's what he said, Be'er Keinu and Be'erach Atzmei, there's 10 hidden spheres. But Be'er Keinu and Be'erach Atzmei. But Be'er Ke, in other words, compared to God, the source, the whole thing is makif, and it's all that has no distinctions. So you could technically say this here as well. But first of all, the Rebbe Rashab wants to spell everything out. And he hasn't talked about it. Esesviras Hagnuzis, you could say that. Because there, what radiates above before the Tzimtzum is only the Ratzon Elyon. It's only the desire of the divine. Here, you're talking about in the world now, in the structure of existence. You don't only have distinction of 10 in the structure, you have distinction of 10 even in the transcendent. So the question is, what that means exactly. So obviously you could answer that it means that from the perspective of the desire, there's really no ischalkus. But since the desire needs to have the 10 spheres, so it has within it some type of distinction. But I don't want to speculate. I'm just throwing it out because it seems like the obvious answer. But let's see how he's going to develop this now. And it's explained in Eitz Chaim Shom. There, what he said earlier. So far he's quoted 2 Eitz Chaims, that there's iggulim in, there's sefirot in iggulim, there's sefirot in ak. She'iggulim yesh behem mailo mata. Now we go further. The iggulim have them higher and lower. They have a hierarchy. She'igul ha'elyon sevivu makif le'igul shalamata. Because when you said there's iggulim within the iggulim, you're saying the igul ha'elyon.
That answers my question. I had a question before.
The higher igul is seviv, surrounds and encompasses the eagle, a lower eagle, a lower shalmata memena, that's lower than it. Ukumay eagle hakeser, makif the eagle ha-chochma. Remember, it's circles within circles. The eagle of keser, it's not circles that are side by side.
I was going to ask you how it was. If
Yeah.
It's inside this big circle, or if it's inside.
No, it's within. Eagle b'teich eagle is the expression. So it's like this. It's like if you look at the big picture, you have big circles. And each circle, you have a bunch of small circles, and everything is within. It's like a constant, yeah.
But not like a circle, and things are in that circle.
Right. Well, the question is if Bria, the iggulim of Bria are in the circle of Atzilus, because then it's going to get a little complicated. Because you have, let's say, 10 circles in Atzilus. Now, where's Bria going to fit in exactly?
Right.
So it could be that Bria begins a new series of circles. So you do have different circles that are not within each other.
And there's a big one.
And there's the big, that's everything, right? But definitely the world itself, in Atzilus itself, it's igul b'teich igul. I don't think the worlds are igul b'teich igul. I may be wrong. I'm thinking.
They always show a chain.
No, because that's because of Yeshur. I'm talking from the beginning of iggulim, whether the iggulim of Bria are within the iggulim of Atzilus. I don't think so. Momash or not. Maybe I never saw. Maybe I'm wrong. But that right now he's talking like a spheres for sure not. Keser of the eagle of chochma is within the eagle of Keser. Fine. Because that's Yeshur. That's Yeshur. Makif, there is no ma'ilama. Anyway, but now he's going that. So now he's going further. That eagle has ma'ilama. Ukuma eagle ha Keser, makif the eagle ha chochma. Like the circle of Keser. Think of it as a circle within a circle. And it's superior to it. And he's above it. So circle within circle, chochma binah go on till malchus, which is the lowest of them all. He's the most inside circle, the most inner circle. But he's also the low, gerua mekulam. Meaning, gerua means inferior, but gerua means lowest. So you see here, now ma'ilomata, now makif also. Like it says there in Neitz Chaim, the biyesher hapnimi mekulam meshubach mekulam. In yesher, the one that's most internal is the one that's most precious, most valuable. V'achitzeni hamalbish kulam gerua mekulam, and the outer dimensions that dresses up and enclose them all. A gerua mekulam is the gerua. For example, in the human body, any structure. The things that are most internal, like the internal organs, are far more precious, as the skin and the bones and the skin and the layers are protectors. In the Beis HaMikdash, the Kodesh Kadoshim is the mu'ula, the thing that's more the pnim shebepnim, the inner of the inner. And the outer layers, that's in Yesher. In Pnimi, it works that way. But the makif he's going to say is the opposite. Uber makif lehepech. And in transcendent is opposite. Shachitzeni haseviv kulam meshubach mekulam. The outer dimensions are the higher dimensions, are greater meshubach, are more precious and desirable, or meshubach, more valuable. V'apnimi gerua mekulam. 1 second, let me finish. V'apnimi gerua mekulam. And the inner circles are the ones that are the lowest levels. So in other words, Keser, the makif of Keser, that surrounds all the circles, is a far higher one than chochma, and malchus, the one that's all the way inside, the smaller circle, is the weakest one. The opposite direction.
So saying malchus of the seer would be in Yosher would be the highest.
He didn't say that, by the way. He didn't say that. He just said the pnimi. What's the pnimi? You want to know what the pnimi is in Yosher? Yeah. Maybe malchus. He didn't say. He didn't say here. It's possible that that's correct. He didn't spell out what the pnimi is. I mean, based on what he's saying, it seems that way. Because malchus is the most inner, and makifim is the lowest, and the pnimi would be the highest, meaning the kavanah is there. But I'm not sure if that's what he means here. I'm not sure. I have to know what he means by yesher, pnimi. It could be chochma is the most pnimi of all the 10 spheres, and that's the highest. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it plays itself out in the spheres, let's put it this way. Because it's like pnimi and makif is a whole different discussion now. Pnimi and makif. Because he's not saying what he said earlier, that from the beginning of kavana, the lower the level, the higher. He didn't say the lower the level, the higher it is. That's not what he's saying here. He says Yesher, the structure of Yesher is that the outer rooms are more external, and the inner sanctum is where the key is the most powerful. Right. Yeah, I don't think he's talking about the spheres. And a makif is the other way around. The outer makifim are higher levels. That's really what he's saying. So I don't think he's talking about the spheres. He's talking about more how structural.
It's important like a panemius of the Yosher.
He didn't say that either.
No.
He didn't say chitzenius of the makif. He's not saying chitzenius of the makif. He's saying that the outer makifim. In other words, when you say, for example, that the outer makifim of the human body is what? Is our skin, our hair, our bones, the outer layers. That outer makif is not, in the level of Yesher, is not considered to be superior to what's inside. In makifim, it is. The outer makifim are the more superior forces. Okay. Maybe he'll explain it more, but right, that's what he's saying right now. Okay. So here we go. Is the hepech harikamoish yesh ma'ala mata b'yeshed? The bottom line that he wants to say, this was as a tangent. It wasn't relevant to the discussion. He just wanted to say there are levels. So just like there's a ma'ala mata, a hierarchy in the world of yesher and pnimi, internal, immanent, yesh ma'ala mata and gam iggulim v'sevim makifim zelazeh. Same thing. There's a ma'ala mata. There's a hierarchy in makif in iggulim in the circles, and they surround and encompass each other. So we have here really breaks the question down into two. One is we have ischalkus in iggulim, chochma, binah, so on. Two, we have hierarchy in iggulim because one is higher than the other. Iggulim are higher than one another. Which is exactly, if you remember back then, chapters ago when we spoke about pnimi, we said the main thing with pnimi is that there is, number one, each of us has fundamentally different madregas. Chochma is fundamentally different than binah. And there's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy that's also essential. Defines one has more energy than the next. And now we're saying that the spheres and hierarchy also makifim, seemingly. So we have here a contradiction on the table. Now comes the answer. However, ze eina seisra dayan leikar inyan. This does not yet really contradict the ikar seisra dayan. That everything we've said here, or maybe the last point, is not really a contradiction. In other words, he's soon going to find the real state. This is the truth is what we said now does not really yet contradict leikar inyan to the primary theme. In other words, sometimes someone asks you a question, and the question is legitimate, but you're not contradicting the point they want to make. You have a question, it's a technical question. He says here, it's not contradicting ikar inyan. Iggulim b'chinas ein safe. It's not contradicting the primary thing that we spoke earlier, that iggulim are shapeless or ein safe. Why? Because we learned, discussed earlier, that there are many levels. There are different levels of ksarim and makifim, from kesser of ak adam kadman all the way to kesser of asiyah. V'akol b'chinas kesser, and they're all in the state of kesser. Let's read. We'll see where he's going with this. The ishtalshus haksarim zemezeh, and the ksarim ishtalshus, the evolution of the ksarim are one from another. As we said, they have their own track. They have their own so-called, like an express track. There's a local track and express track. The local track is chochma binah. Express, you take the kesser track. Okay. This is discussed in last chapter 79. That they're all in the state of ein safe. And just like the ratzon of asiyah is exactly the same ratzon, meaning from the perspective of the bala ratzon, not from the perspective of the structure, because it is kesser of asiyah. It's exactly the same desire as the one natzilus. Like we learned before in chapter 79. We explained there the difference between functional seichel, like what we saw there, was craftsman seichel. The seichel of seichel hamaisi, how to embroider, how he said art. It's fundamentally different personality than atzmus hachachma vatzil. Mashengen harotzen basiya einem usacher. Desire, on the other hand, of asiya is, yes, it's a desire for something different, but the desire itself is qualitatively of the same personality, because all it is carrying as an agent of the one who wants that desire. And according to this, he's explaining how what he said till now is not really a contradiction, because based on what he's discussed earlier, when you really understand it, so when we call one, so now what we call something igul elyon, something is a higher igul, something igul tachten. This doesn't mean that they're fundamentally a hierarchy, one is higher, their fundamental personality and level. It means the energy and the revelation in the higher igul, in the higher circle, the higher transcendent force. Maybe igul atacht. It radiates more air than the igul atacht. That's why it surrounds and encompasses the lower. In other words, let's just use an example. When it comes to seichel, when you put seichel, for example, to pick up a cup or to throw a stone, you don't need as much, you have minimal amount of seichel there, right? Investment of energy. You spoke earlier, for example, it's even a habit. You don't even need to train somebody to throw a stone. Especially once you've done it several times, it's almost reflexive. But a little seichel needs to go, because you have to say, I'm going to throw it this direction, that direction. When it comes, let's say, to seichel of writing an idea or communicating, there you got to concentrate. You got to use a lot more brain power. There's a qualitative difference between these two. Okay? The desire to throw a stone, and the desire to write or to convey does not have quite the same. The desire is different in context. Yes, here desire is to write. So you look at the product, it's a inferior product, so to speak. But from the perspective of the desire, it's fundamentally the same thing. It's just that here's now a desire to throw a stone, here's a desire to think. So in perspective of brain power is absolutely different. They're not the same brain power. Different energy. Because primi, There's a fundamental hierarchy going on, a fundamental distinction. Ratzon, it's desire. So if your brain is sending a message through the nerve system, throw a stone, or it's sending a message through the nerve system, think of an idea, the thinking needs more work. But the desire doesn't, it's not like a bigger investment, like, you need to have a real, deeper type of, it's not like fundamentally a different desire. It's just a different message, basically. So from the perspective of the revelation of it, like he says, the gilui, it's lower. That's why it's a makif of a lower world. But from the perspective of the makif, so in other words, this that we're saying there's levels and spheres doesn't mean that there's really spheres. It means it's in the manifestation of the desire there's levels. He's obviously not going to accept this, because then the Eitz Chaim, that's why he kept saying l'chayra. Because then the question, you have to wonder what was the question in the first place.
Yeah.
It seems like he's not going to accept this, because he wants to say there's actually spheres in iggulim. Because this would be more, it's the iggulim have a function of, but let's see, I don't want to guess.
And it really comes down to how many ideas, and then as it breaks down to less ideas, that's where the hierarchy is. Just how many ideas, because then it breaks down each inner circle.
Okay. So anyway, he's saying, so the distinction is er v'gili, that that's more and higher. U'be'emes b'chol igul v'igul yesh b'mayla mata b'efen hanal. Okay, no, this is already, he's now not going to accept this. Fine. So this is seemingly an answer to the contradiction. That yes, there's Milo Mata, there's a distinction, but the distinction is not really in the iggulim, because they are fundamentally of the same personality. It's only in their so-called impact. Right. But he says now, be'emes, but in truth, I'm not sure if this is a contradiction or it's continuation. Let's see where it goes. Ube'emes, in truth, he doesn't say but in truth. He says ube'emes, and the truth is, b'chol igul v'igul yesh b'maylo mata b'efen hanal. Every igul, an igul, every circle, every makif.
I think it's a continuation because he just said it.
Well, let's see. Yesh b'maylo mata b'efen hanal has in it a hierarchy, like we discussed earlier. Shesh igul elyon v'igul tachten. Because there's a higher circle and a lower circle. The same thing in the higher eagle itself. There's a higher part of it and there's a lower part of it. Because the eagle itself has the top of the eagle and the lower part of the eagle. Let's see where he's going. Because in the beginning of the eagle, the top part of the eagle, meaning top from the perspective of the structure. So let's read what he says here. Elyene is Elyene. Sounds like the top. You're asking questions. Let's learn like children learn. Let's learn what he says here. Why? Maybe not. So let's see. I don't know. The top of the eagle, the energy radiates more. As the eagle continues and extends, it doesn't radiate with that same intensity. Like it says elsewhere in the repair of a sin or iniquity. He's giving an example, so we're going to get back to this. The begam, the blemish, the damage, the scar, the wound, they're all correct words, is in two things. When a person sins, there are two wounds that happen, two scars. What's the one I wanted to use? Indentations. No, two scars. The first thing is that the energy is removed. You remove energy. It's like the blood like leaving the limb. So energy is being drained. That's a good word, silik, drained. Yeah, it means literally to expire, but V'abeis yunikas achatzenim b'yeser. Makif cheka kasuv. The second is the yunikas achatzenim, we'll call the negative energies, the negative forces. Chatzenim literally means outers, the outerlies. But they come when there's no energy, when there's no one to protect. It's like when bacteria and infections come is when we're at our weakest. Yeah. So when yunikas achatzenim, that they wean, they nurse, right? They like parasites. They see not the seep. What does a parasite do? It sucks energy more than it's makif cheka kasuv, more than they're measured. What is allotted measure, right? Shahari al pi cheka kotzav lem, because according to their allotted measure, al pi maimer kav hamida, according to the maimer of kav hamida. Kav hamida is an expression. Kav hamida means literally a measuring rod or measuring stick. It's like when you cook, you use a thing that measures. So kav hamida is an expression used in Kabbalah Chassidus from Zohar. Later he speaks kav hamida. There's kav ha. There's two. There's kav hamida and there's kav ha. Not a moeded. Kav ha. Will come to me in a minute. And kav hamida means that the energy is something that's giving energy to everything in existence. So the cheka kotzav, a lot of the amount that they get, a pimayim kav hamida means on God's expression like asar mamar, hama is mekabel chayes mitzumtzum. According to their allotted measure, they receive very little energy. And their grasping, where they hold on to, where they get their energy, is just on the back side of the skin of Malchus. So it's literally like bacteria. Like on the back skin, they get something. Like we all have microbes that feed off. But they're getting only what they deserve to get. They're not intruding, they're not invading. And going for the blood. Right. Exactly. Tamal. Kaneda, as it's known. But what does the chet do? When you chet and you weaken, you create a state where they now are going to get more than they usually get. So two things happen with chet. One is the energy is drained. And two, the chetzenim grasp. V'gam netzutzes the gedusha. Right. V'gam netzutzes the gedusha nivloim b'hem. Now it gets worse. And also the sparks of gedusha and nivloim get swallowed up by them. In other words, they begin to now also eat and consume even the kedusha, because now they've the enemy has entered. The tzorach lis atik and gamkin bebeis in yanim elu, and the tikkun, the repair, therefore, has to also be in these two things. Ha'echad litchesh lahavir yinikas achitzenim. One is to push away, to repel, and lahavir to move away the yinikas achitzenim, the sucking of these outer forces, the nurturing. And in parentheses, he has v'gam levarer likach mehem achayis animshach lahem, and also to refine and to take away from them the life that is being transmitted to them. So there's really, in this first one, really it's second level, but the first, there's two things. One is to push them away. Basically, it's like if you see a maggot or a mosquito, push it away. But also, it's to not let them get the chayis.
Take it back.
Right. Well, the equivalent would be, you can't get the blood back from the mosquito, back. But basically, yeah. And Aveda, you could. V'abeis, which is the aleph before, the first problem, hamshachas ha'eris b'kelim. To bring back the energy that was drained. To bring back, transmit back, draw back down the energy into the kelim. He says, fine, okay, so be it. I mean, it could be either way, really, but it doesn't matter here. The point is exact. And the example that we're using is like this. When, God forbid, let's say blood stops circulating to part of the body, so the part of the body is in great risk. Gangrene, but also infections and other things, because the blood, the life, keeps it going. So one thing is you have to get rid of the maggots and the parasites that have gathered and are feeding off of it. That's an Aveda. Aveda, the first thing is getting rid of the negative. And second is you have to bring back the energy. You have to draw back energy into there. So it should be strong again. It's not just enough to fight off infections. Okay. What's irrelevant to us? Because this is all to explain what makif is. All this is through the transmission of the makif. As we know, makif repels the gleaning, the nurturing, the suckling of the outer forces. V'gam hamshachas primi v'adei hamshachas makif. And also the hamshachas primi, the second thing it does is it brings in, it draws down an energy. Because Amshacha, the transmission of the immanent energy, is through the transmission of the transcendent energy, because that's its root and its source. He said all this earlier, by the way. However, in order to remove, not talking about protecting now, once the Chetzenim have already invaded, to remove them, remove their power, makif. That has to come from a higher dimension in the makif itself. So general makif, let's take about our skin. Our skin protects from infection. So it's a makif is protection from infection to enter into, and it's also giving energy to the rest of the pnimi. Then, unfortunately, something happened, and there was a penetration. There was an intrusion. So now you need a stronger makif. You need a stronger dimension of the makif, because you need a stronger, a higher energy. Because that which is the higher something is, the lower it goes. And now you can't rely on the energy that was before, because before the preventive energy is not going to be enough. You need new troops. You can't rely on the troops before who have been compromised. So makif you need to have, that's what he says here. You need a higher level in the makif now to repel and to fight off these intruders. Specifically, because you don't want just want to repel them and push them away. You want to take back what they took from you. Right. They took from you energy. They took, let's say, weapons. They took hostages. So it's not just you need more strength to repel them, which also is you need to actually take it back from them. That's why you need to have a powerful energy. That the spark should be drawn to it. So think of it like this. Sparks are here. There's a flame. Okay, hold on a second. Let me say it anyway. So you have sparks in here. So everything is fine. Sparks are orbiting around the mother flame. Everything is fine. But then there was, for some reason, some turbulence. So it blocked the energy from the mother flame. So the stars have begun to lose their orbit, and they've been grabbed by some other gravitational pull of Chetzenim. So it's not enough to just go back to where you are. Now you got to go and counter that and get it back. The black hole or whatever it is that's drawing them. Yeah. So you have to counter that. So you need to have, from the makif it has to transmit a powerful energy, so it should draw back those netzutzes back to its orbit. So it goes like this. Like a flame that is drawn toward a torch. And the more that the torch is greater and stronger, the spark will be drawn to it even when it's distant.
It's very interesting. They keep on meaning this muscle, and not from a magnet to muscle or more powerful.
I absolutely.
There's more of ruchni, so that's where the muscle is from a ner. A ner is from shvasadam, so the neshama is from a ner. But the gashvis to bring a muscle from a magnet, which is even more powerful, pulls everything towards it.
And then you need a stronger magnet.
It's more apparent than a torch.
Back. You need a stronger magnet to get it back.
Well, nitzutz and the vukas fits much more because you talk about the neshama is ner Hashem nishmas adam. Anyway, it's interesting how he went off here to a whole Aveda. It's also connected to the Mesa Tshuva, because it's about the Kira of Hamor al Nitzutz. But let's just see how this is going here. Actually, it's a little easier because he's applying it in much more Avedic terms. But bottom line, he's still going back to makif being Hamayel Lamata. So we'll see what it says. In order for there to be the transmission, the energy in containers, that comes from the lower part of the makif, because it's more commensurate to the immanent energy. Yeah, this is going to need explanation because the whole new sugi is opening up here. Makifim. v'nimtza. So we see from this, one thing is clear, the Rebbe Rashab is going to be very thorough about this makifim. He's not leaving any stone unturned. He's bringing from every maimer and every possible source to make sure that makifim we have it figured out. Are there schalkus or there's no schalkus? Okay? So that's the good news. When you finish with this, you're going to master the art of makifim. So he says like this: Nimtza, from all this, v'nimtza, from those we find shabi igul gufi yeshbe ma'lo mat b'chinas ribuy mid air. That in the igul itself, there's higher and lower, in more and diminished energy. He is contradicting what he said before. In other words, the answer in chapter 79 is not sufficient, is what I would say, is what he wants to say. Because there, you're basically saying there's no real ma'lo mat and rotzen. It's only the giluyim. Here, clearly, from this whole thing with Aveda, there's a whole thing. It's a whole process. Makif in general is a certain power. If there's a chet and oven and there's a weakness, you need to have more energy, and you need to have more repelling, and you need more intensity. So makif is like there's a whole. In other words, makif too has a channel where you could increase makif and lower the makif. So let's go like that. Before we were learning chochma and binah have that. More chochma when you write and think than when you throw a stone. So that's clearly different levels. Ratzon is just different shlichus, and you could say. Here's the shlichus of Asiyah, here's the shlichus of Atzilus. You could say, Ratzon, but there's no more application of desire when you're writing something than when you're throwing something. It's not the more application. There's more application of the mind, but not more application. But here it appears that the makif itself has volume. There's a higher level of makif that achieves things when you have a sin. There's a lower level of makif that gives keichus to pnimi and that you don't need when there's no sin. So clearly, what he's proving here is that makif has, yes, you can higher and lower the volume. Look, it's new what he's saying because we haven't discussed this at all till now. He's clearly going into a new discussion, so don't be disturbed. I mean, what we said is not a concept. What we said, he's going further. Clearly, makif has something now. The question is, what is the structure that this is? That's what we need to. You don't have to speculate. I think if you speculate, you're going to cause more problems.
That's what he said. He's bringing down a new rotzon for repair.
That's not what he said, by the way. He said that the makif itself is a higher and lower. That would be an answer to the question. He's saying that the makif itself has an elyon and a tachten. That's the dilemma here right now. Which means, at the bottom line, properties of pnimi are now being associated to the interface of makif. So if you really want, ultimately the ultimate goal is going to be that there's a makif and pnimi and there's a pnimi and a makif. That's for sure. But he's building the case. First we established that makif and pnimi are two worlds. Then we established makif as a relationship with the pnimi. Now he's going further and saying makif actually has within it some type of structure. What that structure is, we're going to find out. No, for sure not. That's pnimi as pnimi as it gets, because then it undermines the whole eretz mitziyarim. Then you can say that eir is poshet and the matziyarim is in the makif. That's what you want to say. No, you want to say that just like eir is what?
Just the eir is the kelim mitziyarim, and the eir is also mitziyarim. That's the same thing makif and pnimi.
But no, because the whole point was that eir is pnimi is mitzuyah. That was his chiddush. To say that, to start saying that, because air pnimi is mitzuya, that's for sure. It's pnimi, it's esosphere, it's no, he's definitely not going there.
The kelim is considered a makif. Yeah, of course. In the air, you look for your messages.
No, that was the whole point. Mitzir means that it's not considered a makif. That the air, when it's coming from Shmai Vav Tayim, has chesed and gvur in it. It's not a makif. Rotzen is not air pnimi. Let's make this very clear. Air mitzuya is keiches pnimi, 100%.
Compared to the kelim?
Even compared to the kelim, yeah. Kalim may not understand that, but the air is not kolma. He says air all the way to its root is air pnimi. That's the whole point. That the sharshe air is what you're saying undermines the whole hemshech here. The hemshech was saying that sharshe air is all the way to the root. There's the 10 hidden spheres.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
No, I'm trying to understand. So now we're talking about the makifim, which are
so their air we established has tziyur. Now the question is, the makifim have tziyur.
You're saying chochma, including the air and the kelim. Whenever you say chochma, whenever you say binah,
that's what Ayin Beis is doing. Yeah. Now he's not talking about eres pnimim, for sure not.
So whenever you say chochma, binah, das, you're including that side the air and side the kelim.
It depends which maimorim you're talking. It depends which maimorim you're talking. Yeah. Generally, chochma is klei chochma. Yeah.
And you're including both of them when you say chochma.
Yeah.
And now when we say makifim, we're talking about the rotzen to that.
Yeah. And there's also 10 spheres now. That's what he said. In addition to 10 spheres of Yesher, there's 10 spheres in iggulim. I know what you want to say. You want to say it's just like he was Machadish. There's Esespheres Mitziyarim Pnimi. He's coming now and saying there's a certain type of Esespheres in the makifim. Yeah, but Pashtus he's going there. But I don't want to speculate. What's the point? The Rebbe Rashab is going. Let's see what he says. I'm not, for sure he's going that direction. It's clearly going deeper. Remember, there's a point where makif meets pnimi. I remember I told you chapter 59. He says clearly, Be'erkei, he's mitzayir esespheres. Is it makif or pnimi? In She'erin Sof Livnei HaTzimtzum, in the Rotzen Kloli, is Shir Atzmi B'Keach. Is that a makif or a pnimi? On one hand, is the root of pnimi. On the other hand, it's a makif because from his perspective, it's just another rotzen of his. Remember, the beauty here is going to be that world of rotzen. Since the Eibishter's rotzen is mahava, you could say there's pnimi in the rotzen. There's a pnimi in the makif because the makif creates the pnimi.
There's also no pnimi before the tzimtzum. So that's the tzimtzum. It's really a makif, but it's
that's what I just said. Yeah. But let's go there. Let's see where he goes. I'm not sure. I don't want to jump the gun. It's clearly connected to all of that. So where are we here? Nimtza that there's a higher and lower. However, the mailamata
is not defined by Rib and Miyut.
Yeah, he's saying mailamata generally, not the primary thing of hierarchy is not defined by quantity and quality of energy. And he's going to go back to something he said much earlier. Because even in immanent energy, we explained earlier, give me some water please, if you don't mind. The iked inyan, mailamatu shamadrega al yenu b'chinas maila be'etzem adragosa. Thank you. But we learned even with immanent energy, the primary distinction is that one of them is fundamentally a higher level than the other. Remember he spoke then, is binah diminished chochma. In other words, diminish the energy of chochma, it becomes binah. That's not correct. Binah is a different source, a different type of thinking. So really what distinguishes one sphere from the other? That they're fundamentally different. And that's why, qualitative, right, that's why there's a quantity difference in energy. So, for example, you say electricity, that you would say there's no real difference. Electricity is flowing, and then one container takes more, one container takes less. So you have filters that, let's call this, diminish the flow. No different than water coming from a big pipe going to a small pipe. So in chochma and binah, the pipes are actually different, and therefore there's a different type of energy, higher and lower. That's even in pnimi. He's he's explaining now Maila Mata, right? Like chochma is fundamentally different qualitatively than binah, like you discussed earlier at length. We're going now back to chapters in the 40s, I think, or even the 30s. Lamed Ches? Yeah, right. Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. Right. But the ribuy and miyat, the more or less energy that each one has, that's not the primary definition of its hierarchy. Gam be'er pnimi, even in immanent energy. Sharigam b'chinas miyat hu eiseh mehusa esha b'chinas ribuy. Because when you're talking ribuy and miyat, you're not talking about qualitative difference, you're talking quantitative difference. Diminished energy, like I said, with water or electricity, is the same fundamental personality as the abundant energy. The only difference is it more diminished or more abundant? The Maila Mata, the hierarchy in Chochma and Binah, in the state of Ribuy and Miyat, more and less, that the spark, in the flash of the idea, radiates a very strong, powerful energy. What does that mean? That there radiates the subtlety and the refinement, the subtlety and the loftiest the loftiness of the sichli, of the idea. And when you comprehend it with binah, that intensity, that subtlety gets diminished, gets concealed. All this is fundamentally one muhusha, kol b'chinas sichli. Everything there is seichel. Because also the spark of the idea is also intelligence. So in that case, when you're talking about diminished, yes, it begins with a spark of an idea, and then it gets diminished. So now you have, in chochma, in binah, you don't have the same intensity. But that's not the main distinction between chochma and binah. That's just how their ribuy amid manifests. Okay? The real difference between them, it doesn't compare to the that they fundamental difference between qualitative. The chochma b'chinas riyah v'yisamtus. Chochma is a state of vision, of seeing v'yisamtus and a resonant truth. V'hanocha and a leg, hanocha a conviction. Shebenekudas haskola. All this was discussed back there. The conviction that you have. This is a completely qualitative different. This is not diminished in binah. Binah has none of this. And binah is just comprehension alone. In this, they're fundamentally different. So yes, there's a distinction between them that's quantitative, and there's a distinction between them that's qualitative. The kamas we discussed, this is echus. This is all even in pnimi. We see, so real ma'ilo mata is not based on their level of revelation, but on their fundamental difference. However, their quantitative distinction, more and less, that's just the same personality. They're both seichel, except in the spark, in the nakuda, in the point of chochma, ha'er b'ribuy, u'ba'asaga ha'er b'miyat. In other words, chochma and binah really have two major distinctions. In quantity, binah is lesser and more diminished brain power. And a chochma, it's more intense. But that's aval etzem husam echadu. But they're both fundamentally one. That's why, from the perspective of quantity, binah can have israchvus. It can expand its containers, can expand itself, and come from a diminished state, and should have more chochma within it. Should have more brain power in it. Remember, like he said in the previous chapter, he said, for example, he said that as much as chochma of Asiya will expand, it can never get chochma of Asiya, because there it's a different personality. But in the context of Kamus, or he says here, Ribuy Amiyut, it could expand. Like for example, Bina. After there's a heirachy hasog, after the expansive understanding of something, that he comprehends the inyan lashuri as if it's dafzazayin. Lashuri means well. He really fundamentally understands the subject matter. Had he been a kudus hatamtzis, in the conclusion, when he comes to the summary at the end of it all, meir er gamke, he also said that back then. Yeah. There radiates the energy, gamke begili erav kamei ben kudus haskola. There radiates now the energy with an intense, abundant energy, as it was in the Nekudas Haskol of Chochma. This is all still Ribuy Akamas where they're commensurate to each other in the same Muhus. And even though in this point of Chochma it's still subtler, I should read a little. Is even after the conclusion and the summary, still the Nekudas HaChochma, he also said this back then, is more refined, more subtle, and the Nekudas HaTamtzis, the summary, the Nekudas, in other words, the point before the idea, and the point of summary after the idea, is still not the same level, because it's more subtle in the source, in the beginning, before Chochma.
There's Nekudas HaSkola and Nekudas HaTamtzis.
Yeah. But the neged zeh, on the other hand, you also have the advantage within the summary that you don't have bezakus ubihirus. So there's a clarity, there's a zakus, a clarity, a refinement that you have now in the summary that you did not have in the nekuda. So the first nekuda has more intensity because it's pure to the source, But from a point of view of clarity, there's much more clarity in the summary at the end. Bottom line, he's just saying is that there's distinction, but they're in the same family. The same family, the same muhus. Like it says elsewhere, in his Bar El Perek Lamed Gimel. And he discussed earlier, chapter 33. We'll soon go back to what he's leading to. It's all to explain Ma'ilo Mata in makifim. So we see from this that it could have an expansion. Binah, in other words, can expand. Because it's the same mahus. We're talking now not the fundamental difference between chochma and binah. We're talking about their brain power. As far as brains, seichel goes, one is diminished and you can expand and it can get closer to the chochma. The point that each one has their quality. On the other hand, in the element of chochma binah where they're fundamentally qualitatively different, there the lower level will never they'll never have anything from the personality of the higher level. Binah will never be chochma. So in brain power, binah can understand more, can get more of the idea, but the qualitative difference of binah and chochma, it will never be chochma. The resonance of chochma will not go into binah. As much as the energy will expand within binah, it will never have that. It will not have that resonating truth. Only thing is that through the preparation of the comprehension, as it comes to the summary, by the hamokis hadas, by nakuda, through the profound immersion and concentration in the point of chochma, eicho mahi, what and what, how and what this is, he can come to some type of isamtus, he can come to, even binah can come to some type of resonating truth through this effort. For us, like it says elsewhere, and then when it comes to that type of resonating truth, it's higher than comprehension. Because it's not of the same personality. So we said here's two things. First of all, in Ribui and Kamos, when you're talking about quantitative, yes, binah can expand, it can come close to like the summary that's similar to the point before you began developing it. But as it comes to the qualitative difference, binah will never have the resonance of chochma. Now he's adding, and even if it comes through a lot of concentration, even binah comes to that resonance, that's not because it's binah. It now has achieved something beyond itself. Binah on its own is not a resonating force. It just now, in a sense, integrated a certain element of resonance. I guess this is not going to finish the whole subject in this chapter. But that's it.
He left the makifim.
He's still not in makifim.
Yeah, right.
He's explaining. He can explain Milo Mat. What he's saying, what he's determining right now is that heirachy is not defined necessarily by Ribui Mid, even in Pnimi. So Kolshkein and Makif, it's not going to be defined. It's going to have this fundamental. Well, we'll see where he goes with it. But he's analyzing heirachy right now, essentially, even on Pnimi. Now in a parenthesis, V'gam Ashikos Beitzes Chaim, and also what it says in Eitzes Chaim, which is another book of the Arizal, lesser known. It's brought in actually Eitzes Chaim, Movei Sha'arim are three of the similar books. Eitzes Chaim is another book of the Arizal. So, and also what it says in Eitzes Chaim, the Kashem Shepnimius Abba Pnimius Atik, Kamekem Pnimius Bina Pnimius Atik. So now he's qualifying, he's adding something. The Arizal didn't write. They're Chaim Vital. That's why it's all called Chaim. Eitz Chaim, Eitzes Chaim. Yeah. So Eitzes Chaim. You have the Quantitative. The quantitative Heisofis Vayikra. There's L'Havin Inyam Ashikos Eitzes Chaim, the famous Maimer. Eitzes Chaim was more nafutz, was more around in the time of the Alter Rebbe. Eitz Chaim was also around, but Eitzes Chaim was much more. It was published first, so it's brought a lot more than today would be brought, because Eitz Chaim is far more comprehensive. Eitzes Chaim is a smaller book, but the idea, let's say, of it published first, more popular first. I don't know. We can't know that. Who knows when he wrote what? Eitz Chaim and Eitz Chaim both begin with the tzimtzum. They both discuss it. There's different languages, but very similar. We brought earlier, he brought language from Eitz Chaim. But now he's saying in Eitz Chaim says the following. Just like Primis Abba, Primis Atik, K'moikein, Primis Binah, Primis Atik. Okay, let me explain this briefly. Don't let it throw you, because it's just a concept that's really a tangent and a tangent here, but I'm sure it's all relevant. It's all not tangential. Besides the fact that you have the Yosher structure, remember the plot thickens. You have chochma binah, you have something what's called Primis Abba, Primis Atik. Chochma, deep inside of it, has within it, in its inner dimension, has in it the Primis of Atik. Okay. Now it says in Eitz Chaim, it sometimes says that Primis Binah is also Primis Atik. That's why I don't want to go there. He's not saying that here. That's not what he wants to say here. It's probably connected, but not right now. Because in other words, at the end of the day, after the whole thing is laid out, as I told you, in a Primi there's going to be makif, and a makif is going to be Primi. No, absolutely not. Because if then you might as well not learn it all. That all is one. For Atzmus, that's sufficient. But for us on the couch, we have to go through the details before we get to all is one, or else you undermine the whole thing. It just doesn't work. That's the humbling reality that we have to accept. And if you go through that process, then you can get into Atzmus. Then you can, basically, 6,000 years God said, you got to pay those dues and then come talk to me. That's all the. So a whole lifetime we spend, and then God says, now you can come talk to me. You got to pay your dues. That's it. You got it. So he's saying also Pnimi. So bottom line is, just for the record, everything is embedded. But this doesn't suddenly undermine chochma and saying chochma is atik. It's not atik. Atik and chochma are not the same. Pnimi is Abba, deep inside, embedded. It has it all from the etzem, so it has something of atik in it. Now, the same thing, Kameikein Primis Binah has something from atik. Why is this relevant? Because he just said now that Binah, he's adding a whole new you see Pnimi and makif here meeting all the time, to be it's clear. But let's keep focused also on what the thread here. The thread here is going to explain Ma'alamat and makif. To explain that, he's explaining what is the heirachy in Pnimi. He's going back. That heirachy in Pnimi, there's the quantitative element, there's a true heirachy. That's binah, chochma as far there's seichel. Then there's the qualitative element. Binah will never get the resonance of chochma. But now he's saying binah will get even that. So you see how much the crossing over is? Even in the ribuy, even binah gets ultimately the resonance. What?
It's not binah anymore. It's not a soga.
So that's what he's going to say in the parentheses here. I think that's what he's coming to explain. So now he said, so binah also has this element of resonance, but it's not binah anymore. Because the point here he wants to make is that they're fundamentally different. So he says, and also what it says in Eitz Chaim, that same like Primis Binah, Abba, Primis Atik, same thing, Primis Binah, Primis Atik. In other words, if I were not to read further, I would tell you that's the Binah Samtus of Binah. It's getting it from Atik, not from Binah. It's going out of it's basically going out of its program to get it.
It's like a good marriage.
Right. That it says mysterious. It's more mysterious as it goes. The mystique, right.
But that's like a third level here, because the difference between chochma and binah is...
One second, let me finish the parentheses. Yashleimer, the mekol mokem b'kol echad hu kimuhusei. Okay, he's answering a very big question. Okay. Nevertheless, you have to say that each one of them, it's muhus. In Primis Abba, Primis Atik, it's the muhus of Abba. In other words, the Primis Atik within Primis Abba is not the same Primis Atik of Primis Binah. That's what he's saying here.
This Primis Abba is that Atik differently.
Hold on, let me see how he's reading it. Hold on. The Ba'aba who kumuz b'chinas hamadregas ha-chochma. Because in Abba, it's like in the Mahuz, the personality of the level of chochma. But Binah k'fi Mahuz madregas ha-binah. And in Binah, it's the Mahus, and in Binah, it's like the personality and level of Binah. V'yashleimer the atik, another parentheses within the parentheses, okay? V'yashleimer the atik, shehu b'chinas tachtena shebemaitzel. And we could say that atik, which is the lower level of the maitzel, let me read it, of the emanator, or connected atik uloshna atak, as it's known that atik is from the word removal, means atak is separate from everything, has a b'chinas shleimus ha'atzmis. Atik is the shleimus ha'atzmis, is the completion of essential completion. One second. And it comes at each level according to its personality. Means that it completes in a fundamental completion, fulfillment, and realization, every level according to its personality. Like you are the completion of it all. Meaning, so there's atik completes being Abba in the level of Abba, and atik completes binah in the level of binah. I'll explain this in a minute. Let me finish reading the parentheses. Like it says, similar like it says elsewhere, the end of that parenthesis is the primis chochma, primis Abba, hem bezich heyachudim tashem echad. Like it says elsewhere, that primis Abba chochma, primis binah, the inner chochma, the inner of binah, are like two unifications. Tashem echad of Hashem echad, mamata l'mayla, mamayla l'mata, from below upward and from above downward. Vaymasha kosa b'imre binah, binah yeru malkish. And looking at Imre binah and the yeru malkish. Okay. Okay, let me explain what he just said here. Well, he's explaining how the structure, the hierarchy, even in immanent energy, has two elements to it. The primary structure is based on fundamental personality differences, qualitative differences. But there's also an element of quantitative difference in intensity of energy. Chochma is, in seichel, chochma is more, binah is less. But they're of the same personality. That's why when binah expands itself, it can come to understanding more, all the way to the point of getting a summary that's very similar to the point of chochma. There's distinctions, but each has a quality over the other. That's in quantitative. What about binah as a fundamental different level? Binah does not have the conviction, does not have the clarity, does not have the emes, the resonance of chochma. And no matter how much you learn, you're not going to get it. But he says, but the fact is we do come. You can profoundly immerse yourself, and binah can come to a level of resonance. So he says that makes binah go outside of its hainul fisheinu esamuhus. In other words, it's fundamentally not binah anymore. Then that binah element of it, of comprehension that its real power is now, it gained another feature essentially that is not natural to binah. Well, that's not inherent to binah, so to speak. Which means. Which answers, in other words, it's still not fundamentally chochma. Verstehst? Even though it now has a feature of chochma, which is, but it's not fundamentally chochma. It's not like that the quantitative. It is still qualitative difference. Now, right, the parentheses, I think he explains it in more detail, but very, very densely. What is it in Kabbalistic terms? That primis binah can reach primis atik. So you could argue if that's the case, so binah does become chochma. Why are you saying that its hierarchy is fundamentally, there's two fundamental levels? Go deep enough and binah becomes chochma. So you say no. Even when binah reaches resonance, even when it reaches atik, it has its own different root in atik than chochma does. It's not like primis, you don't say primis abba, primis atik, and primis binah like is the same primis atik like primis abba. It's two different. What's the havana of that, however? They're both primis atik. So the havana of it is because atik in Haskalah, what's atik? What's the level of atik? Atik, he says, is the shleimus of every level. It's a very powerful piece, actually. I haven't seen this very often. Because atik, we usually refer to atik as being the higher level of the interface, like the tainug, so to speak. Yeah. Here he's saying atik is the shleimus of everything. It's the shleimus, hu shleimus de kula. If you look at anything in existence, atik is its quintessential perfect state. Because atik is rooted in atzmus. It's netak, it's separate from existence. But in the root, it adds that perfection. I'll just get back to his laws. Shleimus ha'atzmis is the shleimus ha'atzmis in everything. Now, it's very important. This is not the root of chochma. Chochma is not rooted in atik. That's not the point. Atik, the way I would explain it based on the context, is probably like Ein Sof, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before there's a Ratzon. And that element of Ein Sof is essentially the perfection of existence. Remember, because it's Mitzias Nimtza. So I would say that he's saying is Atik even though he hasn't discussed it at length yet, atik is that element that I'm trying to find the exact words for it. It's the nekudas ha'atzmis, is the atzmus perfection within everything in existence. That's what I would call it. So it's not even the desire. It's beyond the desire for the world. It's that nekuda atzmis. It's a step below yechelis ha'atzmus. That's what I would say it is.
It's like feeling fulfilled, feeling.
Not quite. I wouldn't put it that way. I mean, maybe in a certain way. The ability, the potential.
Kind of like
I don't want to use tainuk because it doesn't use the word tainuk here. I would just use here atik is that. So therefore,
what does that mean? A step below yechelis?
Yechelis is God's ability. He said before, Yechelis is just God able to do anything. Ein Sof is lower than Yechelis. Ein Sof is already an entity. I'm just trying to find the right words for it. Look, in the interface, let's talk like this. In the interface, immanent energy is as close to existence and structure. Ratzon represents the desire of the source. But Ratzon is also, we said earlier, is not the first step. Ratzon is not Elokei Elam, and it's also not Rachamecha Rabim. Ratzon is Racham Aleinu. Right? So and then the Ratzon has Shir Atzmi B'Keach, where it envisions, and that's already Adeinu Zenu. So the level before Ratzon is divine energy. We said divine energy, the only distinction between an Atzmus is that it's Metzias Nimtza. It exists. But what is its role in the interface? Its role is that it's the pure reality of existence as it's within Atzmus, but not Atzmus, because as I said, Atzmus is beyond everything. You could say Atik is like that. It's not even the seed. You see, the difficult I'm finding is to find the words for it, is because you can't even call it a seed. You see, you can't call it. I mean, I would say, if the Ratzon is how, if the artist, let's talk about the artist. I think that's the best way to go. There's the artist before there's any type of art. There's the artist how he can have infinite possibilities of art. There's the artist how he desires one art, but he's not yet to find the details. There's the artist how he desires the details of the art. All this is before the tzimtzum. I mentioned now 4 levels, right? And they're all necessary. Then there's the tzimtzum, and then there's the artist as he's actually painting the picture. That's immanent spheres. But they're all being informed by all the levels. Everything of the artist is going into it. His specific desire for it, his overall desire, the infinite possibilities, and how he is beyond art. It's all there. God wants us to have a relationship with God all the way to the source. Following? Atik would be how the artist is not even as an artist. But he is the source of all of existence. That's what I would say. It's like the shleimus from the perspective of atzmis in anything. Of binah, chochma, everything. Ratzon for chochma is already arich of chochma. That would be already a desire, a general desire. Then there's the specifics. He's not spelling it out here, but I'm just trying to put it in context because it helps understand where he's going here. Am I making sense? Well, I'm not making sense. I'm making sense to Berki, I'm making sense. To you, maybe not. I think I'm making sense. Hold on. No, so 1 second. Like he says, the words are like this. It's a shleimus atzmi kol madregi k'fi mohusei. That's the distinction. If you're talking atzmus mamish, there's no mohusei. There's nothing to talk about. Here you want to have that it's still somewhere existence is teifus mokim, but it's completely not teifus mokim. It's not, doesn't occupy any space as a distinct reality. I wouldn't say that. I think binah and atik doesn't understand anything. I would say like this. I would say he's talking on a lower level outside the parentheses. That binah, when it comes to samtus and it comes to resonance, it's its own type of resonance. It's not the chochma resonance. And he's proving that with the Eitz Chaim, that because Primius Binah, even in its deepest level, I would say what he's saying outside the parentheses is not even Primius Atik. It's probably within even Chitzenius Binah can have that. You come to deep understanding, Primius Chitzenius Binah, you come to resonance. He's saying from Eitz Chaim, from the Eitz Chaim, it's clear that even Primius Binah in its deepest root is still not, it still has its own kav. The problem understanding it is that you understand when you go up to the source, all the wires are getting connected. he wants to still maintain a relationship that there's this distinction between chochma and binah, fundamental distinction in echus. That's the key here. The qualitative difference is different, even when binah reaches a form of clarity and resonance. That's what he's saying here. The parentheses is really not critical to understand the pnim, but if you want the full picture, the parentheses is very vital. I'll elaborate more, but I think I've said. Is anyone? Are you all confused? What?
I think you were building.
Clear or confused? Or you're not sure with it? Which one? Somewhere between confusion and clarity. That's where I'm at.
I'm just not clear why it says that it goes to atik. Where's atik over here? It's separate. I mean, it doesn't go deeper.
No, you can't. When you talk atik of Atzilus, then you're talking Erin Sef Lifnei Tzimtzum. This is atik Klolis. The only way.
Atik is talking as well.
This is atik of Atzilus, but atik of Atzilus is essentially ke'ein atika higher than ak. So, and Atzilus the Klolis. It's Lifnei Tzimtzum. The pnimius of Kesser of Atzilus. No, it's not. It's higher than Kesser. The pnimius of Kesser. It's not. It's higher than Rotz.
Atik on every level is the same.
Only similarity, not the same. It has similar qualities. Like chochma has similar qualities, but there's different levels here. The point that he's making here, bottom line, is that qualitatively there are two different levels, and even as they go into atik, there are two different levels. That's the point. I would say the answer would be like this. The explanation would be, from atik's perspective, there's no difference between binah and chochma. But from the shleimus that atik gives in each level of existence, there's a difference. They get shleimus according to their level. Binah gets its shleimus and chochma gets its shleimus. That's how I would put it. So if you really sit in atik, from atik's perspective, it's probably all one. You can't distinguish. That's why less smela by atik doesn't have these type of distinctions. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that what we've come to here is that even milo mata, the real distinction, the real qualities, he doesn't even got to makif yet. That's why don't even think about makif right now. The only reason I brought atik in this whole discussion is I just wanted to place it somewhere, because he's adding something very fascinating here, that atik is the shleimus of every entity. Okay, outside of the parentheses, let's finish. But when you talk of quantitative abundance, or the more or less within chochma and binah, it's possible that in the diminished state there could radiate more energy, because it's all the same personality. So we've established that even in immanent energy, the idea of heirachy has to be determined, is fundamentally defined not by more and less, but by fundamental different levels. How this applies to makif is yet to be seen. Because what is this really answering? He began by saying, in this chapter, aren't there 10 spheres in iggulim? Then he said that the truth is, you could say, so it's a contradiction to what we said before. Then he said, but on the other hand, you could say it's not a contradiction, because we said that seichel is a fundamental difference. But this is all fundamentally desire. But then he went and gone and said that in truth, even in makif, there's also milo mata. So he's in process of explaining milo mata and makif. No, in Eitz Chaim it says there are 10 spheres. That in makif there's milo mata is more explaining it with the inyan of Teishvu, where he says a particular abgam. You could read it either way in Eitz Chaim. In Eitz Chaim it's not clear whether the makif has the elyon or tachon. He doesn't talk about it. He just says the makifim have spheres in them.
No, because he's basing pages and pages and pages on this inyan that has malamata. Where do we know that?
He gave the whole example from the Teishvu. He said that's where he proved it from. That's one place that you see it chelik el and chelik tachon, how it affects begamim. You need that's one place. There's sources for that. And ultimately, Eitz Chaim itself, you could technically answer with what he said before, that the spheres are not really their spheres, that they are basically one personality, and they're just, with giluyim there's levels. Look, he's not finished. He's going to get back to all this. We'll see where it goes. But in order to understand the heirachy of the Milo Mata in makif, he went to now discuss that Milo Mata heirachy in Pnimi is also not driven by quantity, but by quality. Okay, we'll see where it's going. So he just finished chapter 80. Let's do the summary. We'll continue the journey. It's a new parsha is opening here. Oh boy. The Kitzur. Summary on page 152. We still have to understand, because aren't there 10 spheres also in iggulim? Igul ha-keser, the circle of keser, the igul of keser, igul ha-chochma. Gam yesh behem ma'ila mata. You see clearly, it's the second thing. They also have hierarchy, higher and lower. Not only how one eagle is related to another, that the lower eagle is inside the higher one, but in each eagle itself there's a higher and lower. The betikun abgomim, the repair of the blemishes, repair of the flaws. From the higher part of the circle of the eagle is the repelling. Okay, the bruise is fine. Is the repelling of the weaning, of the nursing of energy, sucking of the energy of the outer forces. And to take from them back the energy that was swallowed up by them, that they ingested. And from the lower level of the makif is the fulfilling of what was lacking in the heirachy. He didn't say that inside.
I know, but where's he getting? Yeah,
He's getting this says in Svarim.
Because you could say that's the same thing.
You could say, but it doesn't say that. He didn't make up a thing that heirachy elyon. It's not his own AC. This is from Svarim. It's from previous memorim. Look, remember, Ayin Beis is not Aleph Beis of Chassidus. Ayin Beis is assuming you know everything already. So you just don't know the source. I'll tell you the source next class.
But yet, without...
Trust me, there's a source for this.
It seems like without Ayin Beis you can't know anything.
No, but Ayin Beis didn't begin in a vacuum. Ayin Beis is gathering from all the sources before, didn't it? Ayin Beis organizes it and explains it all in a very comprehensive way. The only thing is he didn't say, I think, that Chelek HaTachton is Mili Hachsarden of Erpnimi. Is it correct? Am I correct to say that? Huh? He didn't say that specific detail. Okay, fine.
He said that they have it, that he did say.
That I know, he said, yeah. One second. Good. So we see there's a higher and lower. Yeah. However, we can say the b'mayla mato zehu beribu yamiyut. You can say the mayla mato zeh, that this mayla mato is only in quantity, more and less. Where did he say that? Where?
8 lines on the bottom. It's a little different ICS, but it's the same.
Okay. Yeah. So he says, that this ma'ilomata is in quantity. We explained that even in immanent energy, the primary hierarchy is in their fundamental levels. And this, in their fundamental qualitative difference, binah will never be in the level of chochma. And even as they are in their root, in the primus, in the way they're in inner atik, they're also yashlema, that they're different. But in ribu yamiyat, there is no real milo mata, because yachali ribu bina kamei b'chochma. Because there can be an abundance of energy in binah, like in chochma, kamei b'nekudis hatamtzis, like in the summary. Actually, he's saying here different than I explained it. He's actually answering it. I thought there's a completely different way he was going here. I think I made a mistake. He's saying here, just for the record, he's saying what I think he's saying. In the summary, he's actually answering. He's saying, "B'ribu made ein ze ma'ilo mata."
As far as riba, yeah.
quantity is not going to be
As far as Reba and Miyot, he's saying.
See, I was thinking he was saying, tell me if I'm wrong. The chochma and binah are fundamentally different, that's why there's Milo Mata.
Right.
Here in the parentheses, in the summary, he seems to be saying that Milo Mata doesn't really exist in quantity, because look, he says, Ach yashleim de Milo Mata zehu b'ribu yimiyot. Look, he says b'ribu yimiyot. Then he says at the end, b'ribu yimiyot ein ze Milo Mata. So which one is it? In the quantity level, you could say there's no real distinction of levels, because binah can become like chochma. Not completely, but almost. Qualitatively, they're distinct levels. They never can become one or the other.
It's not necessarily that there'll be a quantitative difference.
So where's the real Milo Mat and Chochma and Binah? It's in their fundamental qualitative difference. The one is fundamentally higher than the other, superior to the other. Right?
And Bini have to work on it.
But here he says, Ach yashleim de Milo Mat zeh b'ribu yimiyot, v'kvan is boyer, b'ribu yimiyot ein ze Milo Mata.
You have to work on it more to get the same amount of
I have to learn the next chapter to really figure this out. I can't tell you right now.
I think he goes like this. The Milo Mata Zeh, the one who you just spoke about.
In makif, right? In
The one
makif.
you just spoke about, that's B'ri B'Yimiyat. Now he's saying B'ri B'Yimiyat essentially is Ein Zeh Milo Mata. I think that's huh?
No, Al B'ri B'Yimiyat is going on the Er Primi. You know what? Let me learn it again and have to learn the next chapter. I don't want to jump to conclusions.
The Milo Mata of Zeh is of the eagle.
Right.
That's B'ri B'Yimiyat. It is B'ri B'Yimiyat because it's not qualitatively different. But he says that was B'ri B'Yimiyat of chochma binah. That's Ein Zeh Milo Mata.
I just the opposite of what
I'm going to learn it inside. Let's stop here. We'll need to explain this whole chapter anyway.
It's possible, yeah.
It depends where he's going here. I'm not sure where he's going, what direction he's going here. That's the thing. Where are we going with this? Is he answering the question? 1 second. Let me just think this through a second. Now here, technically what we learned would seem pretty clear. That Milo Mata, the fundamental, is based on its qualitative difference. That's for sure. Because in the quantitative, Pnimi now, Chacham Binah. Yeah. And when you talk about them as Seichel, you can't really talk so much Milo Mata, because one can lead, Binah can reach to Chochma. In their fundamental levels, never becomes the other. Because there's two fundamentally different levels. So I thought that's what means Milo Mata, that they're qualitatively, one is higher than the other, lower. And he was going to say that similarly in makifim, also the Milo Mata is not mitzad ribu yimiyot, it's fundamentally different levels. Here it's mashma the other way around.
Here it's mashma that the ribu yimiyot is yimiyot the ribu yimiyot.
1 second.
Also, the closer it is to the source, it has more
Right.
You said that before that, right?
Yeah, because there's more rods, different rod zones. So
But chochma binah is a different track.
yeah. So
That's this chapter. Further, I'm sure he's going to elaborate on it.
it would be the opposite of what we would thought,
So you get to the point that it's almost the same. But I think over here, he's still.
No, because here it's almost seems that when you talk about their fundamental difference, you don't say Milo Mata, they're just two different tracks. That's what I'm confused by. See, that's what it seems like he's going now. That the concept of Milo Mata is only in quantity, and really there's no Milo Mata there because one can reach the other. And if you talk about how be'etzem adregosim they're different, there's no Milo Mata. They're just completely two different worlds. That's what it appears here. And that's what appears what makifim are like. I'm a little confused, to be very honest. So what? It's good to go into Shabbos confused. I want to learn it again. I don't want to jump right now. It's look, we're getting somewhere. We'll get there. It's good to not always have it all figured out. I'm just saying that for everyone to know. We are mortals after all. Wishing everybody ksiv chsim teva. Okay, we just did chapter 80. We're holding almost by Simchas Torah, by the way. Sukkos Teishvu already. Page 150 through 152. Chapter 80.